Welcome everyone into the fourth episode of our podcast. Today, August 9, we're gonna have a special topic for you guys where you will see maybe into a new perspective. I will be your host for today. I'm Draco655. The segment we're gonna talk about the episode of today will be what we have played this week, platforming 2D and 3Ds, and does 3 point is a myth or a reality? Let's start this episode with my co-hosts Shuzi and Bendy Human. Hi guys!
Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast.
Hey Draco, hey Shoot, so happy to be back at this again. Let's do it.
Thanks for both of you to be here with me today, guys. Let's start the first segment. How was your week so far, guys?
It was pretty good actually. I had a lot of different systems I was playing on this week that I've never played on before, so it was kind of interesting to try some new systems out.
Yeah, I've been going hard these past couple weeks. I've been playing a good mixture of, on one hand, finishing games I've had in progress for a really long time, and also starting new games and going for quick masteries, quick badges. So I'm excited to share this with you guys.
My week was pretty fantastic as well. I got a couple mastery as well. I play some DS and PlayStation, so I'm very excited to talk about it. So let's talk about my first game. My first game is Bomberman. Yes, Bomberman Fantasy Race on PlayStation by Sherry Birkin. So that game, like many, first of all, it's a Bomberman game, and I didn't know Bomberman game as a racing game into PlayStation, so that was what a surprise for me. So just a brief of this one. You play as Bomberman, but you riding a rabbit or like a little dinosaur. So that's a pretty unique concept to riding something as racing, and you can throw some bombs. And the game is fairly at the start. I would say like those races are not too difficult, but when you hit the mirror mode, the computer are so damn fast that's ridiculous. And the game is great in general. The graphic is great, but at the end you need to grind a lot of money to just unlock the last race. But overall, graphic and the game is fantastic. Good job on the century, and I'm very happy to master it and just have played this game for my first game.
Yeah, I had no idea that Bomberman had a racing game until I saw you play this. And it was fun to watch because you've mentioned this before, but always interesting how every racing game has its own little gimmicks, its own little mechanics, its own little twist on the racing genre. So I think the way that they incorporated it wasn't just a racing game featuring Bomberman, but they actually implemented the bombs as a mechanic in the racing game, and I think that's pretty fascinating stuff. One game that I wanted to talk to you guys about this week that I am so excited about is Learn to Kaizo. I know I've mentioned this on the podcast before, and I hate to be that guy who keeps bringing the same game up week after week, but guys, I'm so happy I finally mastered Learn to Kaizo. I have been stuck on this for weeks and weeks and weeks, and I finally got the midair shell jump. So if anyone listening hasn't played Kaizo Mario before, the midair shell jump is just this really extremely technically challenging maneuver. I spent hours on this one trick just trying to pull it off one time, and pulling off that maneuver, the midair shell jump, that has to rank among my all-time favorite gaming moments. Just the sheer satisfaction I felt of pulling that off. So and not just the satisfaction of pulling it off, but getting an achievement for it, getting that pop up, getting that little bloop, that little sound. I'm so happy, you guys. This is great.
Yeah, and congratulations on that, man, because it sounds like that obviously took a lot of grinding and a lot of practice and precision to finally pull off. And it sounds like you had gotten back to that set after spending some time away from it. And speaking of that, I've kind of been in that mood where I've been going back through a lot of sets that I had previously put down for one reason or another, which kind of brings me to one of the games I played this week, which is Mario Kart 64. Obviously, that's a pretty well known game, but I had put it down a while ago. I had only mastered about a third of it, so getting back into it and really learning the more technical aspects of it, because I had no idea about like turbo boosting and all that stuff, and like trying to beat the ghosts and having to be a little bit more precise than just running the course and just using the items, and actually, learning the aspect of turbo boosting was pretty interesting for me, as I'm not very good at racing games, so it took me longer than I would have liked, but I'm pretty happy that I was able to go back and master that one as well.
Well, I will say like congrats to Bendy first because Bendy, congrats to your learning to Kazu mastery. And for shoot, I'm just so proud to see like one of my favorite first set as Mario Kart, and I'm so proud to be able to just master it. When I saw him play, it was just blast to it. And now you know like the sometimes when you play something and you're a little bit like good to the game, and then you realize the person who played the game you play like very different than you do. So but overall I'm just so happy so you play it. So my second game I wanted to talk with you guys would be the Professor Layton and the Onwood Futures Lost Futures by into the Nintendo DS by Sporytite. So this game is the third set into RA for which will bring life in as per for the Professor Layton series. I have mastered the two of the first, and I mastered the third one. And I'm not like the smartest person to play like puzzle game and stuff, but that game is wonderful. I mean, if you never play Professor Layton, you should definitely play it. The graphic is amazing, the sound is amazing. The story wise, normally I don't really read much of the stuff, but Professor Layton proved me wrong into like rating for some games. And the story, I will not spoil any of this game because maybe some of you did not play it, but the story is just got me to my feelings, and I'm very happy to see this and complete this wonderful game. So thank you for spoiling for the set, and I wish you guys gonna play some Legends.
The Professor Layton series is honestly one of my all-time favorites. I love that series so much. I played it back in the day on the DS as they first came out. Uh, well, what actually got me into the series in the first place was when they announced the crossover between Professor Layton and Phoenix Wright, because I was a big fan of Phoenix Wright at the time, and I had never played Professor Layton, but I had always heard good things about the series. So I thought, hey, maybe I should check these games out. That's awesome that you really liked Unwound Future, though. That's probably my favorite in the series. And like you said, the story is just phenomenal in that one. So I would definitely recommend those games to anyone who might not have played them. And on the same topic, I actually mastered the first Phoenix Wright game this week, Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney. This is a set by Sherry Birkin. It's a pretty straightforward set. It's mostly progression, but there's not a problem with that. It's a visual novel. There's only so much you could do with that game. But it got me thinking. Phoenix Wright is a series that I hold so dear to my heart, and it's one of those series that I will take any excuse to go back and replay. So when I saw that Phoenix Wright had achievements, I got this overwhelming feeling of, yes, I get to play Phoenix Wright again. I finally have a reason to replay the game. So that was pretty great. I'm excited to be playing that, and I'm probably gonna end up doing the whole series on RA. So I'll keep you guys posted on that one.
Yeah, and speaking of that, I mean, we've talked a lot about, looking into other types of games, and I don't know much about Phoenix Wright, but the more you talk about it, the more interested I get in it, and just kind of, I think I've watched people play it before on streams before, so it's something that I'm thinking about looking into at one point or another down the road, and it's always cool to get introduced to new series and games through your friends, and I mean, it happens all the time. I mean, even with games that we play so many games every week that we don't have time to talk about them all, but I know that I can think of at least two or three other stories of games that either Draco's introduced me to, or that you've introduced me to, which is really cool. And speaking of new aspects, I mentioned that I was trying out different new systems this last couple of weeks here, and I played and mastered my first arcade game. I've never mastered an arcade set on Retro Achievements. I mastered Marvel Superheroes versus Street Fighter, also another Sherry Birkin set. Fantastic set, lots of fun. Talked a little bit in the past podcasts about how I really like that art style, these crazy fighting games with these 50, 60, 70 hit combos and just stuff flying everywhere. And had a lot of fun with that and was able to master that one. And she actually just released Marvel versus Capcom Clash of the Superheroes for arcade. Originally, it had a PS1 set, but now it's on arcade. So I'm slowly but surely working my way through that set as well, and having a lot of fun with that. So that's one one new thing that I've gotten to do is start getting into arcade games this week and start to really enjoy them a lot. So it's kind of cool to begin that journey.
So yeah, congrats into your mastery for the arcade one. I did try that set as well of my own, and I can tell you something. It the difference into the PS1 and the arcade is way different than expected. I mean, the PS1 was the control was a little bit like easier for me for the special and stuff, but I can tell the final boss, it got me some troubles into it. And one, like you mentioned, like one console which I never played before was Saturn. So I did play Fighter Megamix by Blah Blah in Saturns. So this is quite interesting for me because, like I said, I never grew up with Saturn on any case. This is another fighting games where it's pretty like unique. You have like a lot of different characters, and yes, you can play as a car characters in fighting games. Okay, and and our piece of meat as well. But okay, but the game on its own is pretty. It was pretty fun to be honest. I did have a little bit rivalry with my friends. With shoot, we try to almost like first to master it, and we got into some interesting like story me and him. But overall, the set it was amazing. We have a ton of blast to play, and thank you, blah blah, for making that one.
Can I just say, it is so fascinating hearing. I think I'm going to call it the evolution of Draco, because as I listen to you on this podcast week after week, it seems like you always have a new fighting game to talk about. And I've known you for a while, right? And I know that you're not typically a fighting game guy, so it's so cool to hear you branch out into this genre and just sort of get more and more into it thanks to Retro Achievements. One more game I wanted to talk to you guys about. This was actually a pretty special experience I had this week. Well, a couple weeks ago. Is Super Mario Brothers 3. And the first question I asked myself is, how have I not played Super Mario Brothers 3 yet? This is an all-time classic. But yeah, I've been playing this on RA. I mastered the set. It was a ton of fun. And what made this a really special experience is I actually did this together with friends. So a few of us got together in a voice call and we were like, all right, we're all going to play Mario 3 with retro achievements at the same time and just chat about it as we play. And it was honestly super chill. It is such a cool way to bring a more social aspect into retro achievements. So if you guys listening have friends who play RA, I would totally recommend doing something like that. Just have an RA night where you get some friends together, play the same game at the same time, and just talk about it. It's a ton of fun.
Yeah, no, and I actually, it's funny that you mentioned that, Bendy, because I mean, I've definitely been there where me and Draco or me and someone else were on the Discord phone and playing the same set at the same time, just going having a back and forth, and it's a lot of the times too. It's kind of interesting when you're both playing it blind, and that's what happened essentially with Fighters Mega Mix this week for Saturn that Draco was talking about. We were both kind of just poking our way through it and figuring it out, and that set was definitely a lot of fun and kind of a different style of fighting game, just because it reminded me a lot of the first Tekken, because it's kind of slow and it's a 3D fighter, but there's just a lot. It's just a lot of fun to hang out with people on Discord and just, both be playing a game at the same time. And, oh, did you figure out this? What did you do for this? What did you do for that? Oh, okay, this and that. And having that back and forth is it's just a lot of fun. It's a very cool social thing to do. So,
So yeah, so speaking of Bendy mentioned about the Draco always try some new games like the fighting games. That's I'm pretty like amazed by me just playing some fighting game to be honest, but yeah, so but what you don't expect from me to play is another racing game. Of course, I play Rave Racer 64 on with the set by Mopane 85. So wave racing or wave race, excuse me. It's pretty much like a game where it's like a sport and it's like on the waters and you just play like you just race with obstacle to dodge and stuff, and the game itself is pretty. I never played this before. I was wishing to play that at some point. I did not finish the set unfortunately, because I need to still learn how the mechanic comes to get a little bit faster than uh, yeah, I need to learn some mechanic of the game. But beside that, the game is pretty fun. I would say it's very like different. And I would say one thing about this game is it's pretty like different. If I compare this to example to Mario Kart, where your joystick is very like more sensitive than other stuff. So it's quite like different to have this experience into other game. But overall, I really enjoyed the game. I wish some of you gonna play it as well. Thanks for Mopane to bring this wonderful set, which I think a lot of people was waiting for that game for so long. So thanks for you. Thanks for that.
Wave Race 64 is one of those games that's always been on my radar. I've always sort of thought, that game looks pretty cool. I should probably check that out at some point. But I've never actually sat down and played it. So I don't know. Maybe this is the push I need to actually play it. On the topic of Nintendo 64, though, one of the highlights of this week for me was playing a Nintendo 64 hack, The Legend of Zelda: The Missing Link. Uh, I I'm torn because on one hand, I really, really, really love this hack. I love this hack so much, and there's so much I want to say about it. But on the other hand, I want to avoid spoilers. I don't want to talk spoilers on this podcast. And I feel like if you haven't played this hack, the less you know about it going into it, the better. So I'll just say this. If you're a fan of Nintendo 64 Zelda, Ocarina of Time, and Majora's Mask, you absolutely you owe it to yourselves to check out this hack. It's that good. I cannot speak highly of it enough. I love this hack so much.
yeah, I wouldn't want to spoil it for anyone because it is a really, really fun hack. I'll just say, because I got the chance to play it as well this week, it's short and sweet. Um, it's basically the in between. So after Ocarina of Time, but before Majora's Mask. I don't think that spoils too much saying that. Just kind of where it takes place in the series, and I won't spoil any of the new mechanics or anything like that. But that if you have played Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, or grew up with those games, that title is short and sweet, really really fun. Can't recommend it enough. Just such a fun little title to play and get to see some interesting new mechanics and twists. And uh, it's crazy when people make some of these hacks how detailed they are. All the little details that they add in the story, because they create custom stories, custom dialogue, custom maps, and all that. So it's always fascinating to see what people who aren't, necessarily professionally in that industry come up with. And yeah, again, I had a lot of fun with that one as well. So congratulations on your mastery of that. And yeah,
So for the last game for this week, guys, I want to bring a very classic, a very friendship ruiners games without it's Mario Party, guys. Mario Party DS. Yes, Mario Party DS by Game Zone. So this is my hype for the week. I'm still currently I did the half of the set already. The set is pretty much you need to collect every single little like badges because you can like after you earn some points you can unlock some little like custom badges, so you need to unlock every single of one if you want to master the game. But overall, I'm so happy to play a Mario Party game back again because this is one of my favorite with Mario Kart. Obviously, one of my favorite games of all time. And I didn't remember how much to be honest, I spent a lot of time into when I was younger to play Mario Party DS with on my console. I even play with my first girlfriend. We play like both at the same time, and just remember all those mini games back again. It was such a blast to just playing it. And the only thing I have issue on the game, I will say, is I'm not used to using my mouse as the stylus, rather the stylus, because when you play like the stylus, I feel it's more like easier to doing some mini games than the mouse. But I mean, I would get the end of it, I guess. But man, Mario Party is such a blast to doing it. So let's further ado and let's talk into the second segment I want to bring with you guys today is the platforming 2Ds and 3Ds. So first of all, I'm very curious to see what is the difference between like the 2D and 3D. So Bendy or Shu, do you have like any like description to what is a 2D or 3D games?
Yeah, so for 2D platformers, versus 3D, you're asking about the differences between the two, and I think one of the biggest differences a lot of the times, unless you're playing a Metroidvania, which is where you have a map and you're going around collecting different items and backtracking, and for example, if there's an item that you'll get from a boss where you need to um, break a wall that you previously couldn't break. You're backtracking a lot and using a map. But I think a lot of 2D platformers, for the most part, aren't really map intensive, right? You're just kind of you're getting through, stage 1 1, stage 1 2, stage 1 3, with the exception of Metroidvanias, and maybe I'm missing a few others. I think 3D platformers, at least a lot of the ones that I played and I grew up with and played a lot of them over the years. There's more of a backtracking element with 3D platformers and more exploration just because of how maps work in games in general. Um, but it's always interesting to see with Metroidvanias, so games where you do have to backtrack, what kind of creative stuff that they do come up with that make you have to backtrack and make you have to kind of think about where to go and what to do, especially in that 2D zone where you're a little bit more limited in terms of the visual aspects, right? Um, you just don't have as much to go off of, really, I guess. But I'm a big fan of both 2D and 3D platformers, so
Yeah, platformers are one of those genres where it's a genre with many subgenres. So we're talking about 2D and 3D platformers, but even each of those genres is so broad. You can narrow it down so much. You could hyper fixate on, let's talk about Metroidvanias, because Metroidvanias are typically platformers, right? Even though the focus isn't necessarily on the platforming, the focus is more on the exploration, it's still a platformer. As for 3D platformers, like Shoot said, a lot of them tend to be more open ended, have more exploration aspects. A lot of them tend to have more of the term I hear thrown around is collectathon, is what people call it. Whereas there's this focus on collecting objects or items, and you got to collect everything. But even 2D platformers sometimes implement those collectathon aspects, usually not to the same extent as 3D. But a lot of my favorite 2D platformers, the objective isn't just to get to the end of the level. The objective is, to collect some things along the way. But and then you have the lines get so blurred because even with 3D platformers, we've talked about the emphasis on exploration, but sometimes there's 3D platformers where the goal is mainly to get to the end of the level. Like you play something like, say, Crash Bandicoot. The levels are pretty linear. The goal is to get to the end of the level, but there are also collectibles along the way, so it has that little bit of collectathon aspect to it. So it kind of brings me to the question, so many different games fall under the platformer umbrella. How do we even define platformer? What is a platformer? What about a game makes it a platformer? Is it just any game where you jump? Is it a game where the emphasis is on jumping across platforms or trying to dodge gaps? Like how do you define a platformer? I'm curious what you guys think about this because I don't know that I know how to define it.
Well, that's an interesting question here, Mr. Bendy. But to be on, to be for me, is like, I mean, for me, I would say like a specific to the platform. I would say like Super Mario Bros. One, because I feel like Mario Bros. One into the NES, and it's like you just like going start. You have like a little bit of platform where you can land on and you can die on. You can just collect a mushroom, but you do the entire stage with a system of linear styles. And I feel for me this is type of like a very good platforming stuff. But at the same time, they have like some the same style as SMB1 example like platforming, but you have like example like Wonder Boy, which I did played, and it's like almost like a platforming, but you need to collect items where you can level up and when you have bosses. So I'm always like, even for me, I'm always confused to see like is it really a platforming, is it like an action RPG? Like some of game are so similar but with a little twist on them, and it's so hard to define, is it really a platforming or it's not. I mean, a very good platforming where I could like imagine or to see, we can almost like talk about like what is a bushy or something like this, like a little like cute stuff. Or I think Super Meat Boy, yeah, Super Meat Boy is like you can just like land into a lot of platforming, almost like Celeste as well. I mean, I have so many great game on mine right now, but it's like you have so many like you can jump into between a lot of platform and you can die like quickly, and then you. But yeah, so in order to like for the 3Ds, I mean, for me like a platforming on 3D would be like Sparrows, but I don't even see Sparrow as really a 3D platforming as well. I just see Sparrow like a very like collecting heavy situation. So a lot of 3D games, I don't even know if they're platforming or not. Almost like I have another example of this 3D would be like almost like Mario Sunshine. I mean, Mario Sunshine is a lot of platforming, jumping, collecting and stuff. So I'm very curious as well, but yeah.
Listening to you talk, Draco, got me thinking. You mentioned the original Super Mario Brothers, right? And I feel like there was this entire era of gaming across the NES era where people realized Mario is so dang popular. Let's all copy Mario. And you had this whole period of platformers where every platformer was a Mario clone. They all tried to do exactly what Mario was doing. It just kind of, it was popular for Mario. Let's try it here too. But I think you make a good point that in recent years, especially, we're seeing platformers that are getting more and more unique. And a lot of the times, platformers will focus on a gimmick to the platforming. Like you mentioned, Celeste. Okay, Celeste is all about you have the wall climbing mechanic and you have the midair dash. Those two mechanics basically comprise Celeste. It's built around that mechanics. So it's not just a platformer, it's a platformer with a little bit of a twist. Same thing with Super Meat Boy, like you said. Super Meat Boy has the specific, okay, well, you slide up and down the walls in a very specific way. That game has a big emphasis on wall jumps and the way your wall movement is. So I think that's kind of the next step of platformers is you take the idea for a platformer and it's like, okay, but we don't just run and jump through the levels. There's a twist. There's some twist. There's some hyper fixation on a single aspect of the controls that we could design this game around. And honestly, that's not really a new concept. If you go back far enough, games like, say, Bionic Commando or something like that, where you have like a grappling hook or some sort of weird movement mechanic that's not typical but still technically a platformer. One of my favorite indie games is the letter V six times, VVV. And I don't know if you would call it a platformer because you technically can't jump, but the way that game works is you have a gravity mechanic where you could reverse gravity and you could flip up, flip down. You just press one button and it reverses gravity. And like, is something like that technically a platformer? Technically, you're not jumping, but I don't know what else to categorize it as. But I guess the point I'm trying to make without rambling too much is I think a lot of my favorite platformers are platformers that find one specific aspect of the controls, the mechanics, and then they design the whole game around the one thing that makes that game unique compared to other platformers.
And it's interesting to hear both your thoughts on kind of what defines a platformer, because it is such a broad category. And, I think that's why there are subgenres within the platforming category just for that very reason. And, you mentioned, Bendy, talking a little bit about taking that one core mechanic and then building the game around it. And I think typically games that do that a lot of the time do it exceptionally well rather than trying to do too much and trying to have, because when you I feel like with platformers, when you have too many mechanics, I can't think of any specific examples right off the cuff, but when you have platformers that just have too many mechanics where you're learning a move like every 20 minutes or something like that for the first 2-3 hours of the game, it just gets a little bit overwhelming. I guess maybe that's just me, but if there's like, 5, 6, 7 different mechanics, then it just ends up being too much. So I think one of the most important things about platformers is kind of striking that balance between simplicity and complexity and finding that happy medium, just like with a lot of different games, not trying to overdo one thing or underdo several things. But I think that is really, really important with platformers, is having that happy medium of, you know giving the player an interesting toolkit and then seeing how they'll use it, and then maybe having that one core skill that either develops over time, like a jump or a grappling hook or something like that. Just something to keep the player engaged, but not to put them in an overwhelming position where they just got um, way too many different mechanics. Because I feel like what ends up happening is you're like, oh, I never used this weapon, or oh, I never used this mechanic. This was useless throughout the whole game, and I think that's a really I guess unsatisfying, or not very satisfying would be the way to put it. Not a very satisfying thing where you have, you get a weapon or you get something like, man, I never used that the whole game. What did they even put that in there for?
The more we talk about this, the more my mind keeps going to Mario games. Because, you think of platformers, you think of Mario. It's like peanut butter and jelly. They just go together, right? Name a more iconic duo. And when I think about the 3D Mario games specifically, I feel like they really exemplify this concept that we're talking about you take a core mechanic and you build the entire game around it. So after Super Mario 64, I think a lot of people wanted Nintendo to sort of play it safe and make just another 3D Mario where you run around and jump and stuff. And then they did something a little bit controversial with Sunshine, where you have this new flood mechanic, this water backpack thing. And the thing is, though, that game works so well because the entire game is built around that one fairly simple mechanic, and it pushes that simple mechanic to its limits. And the 3D Mario games have been doing that ever since. You look at Mario Galaxy, they take the gravity mechanic and the spin jump. Very simple, build a whole game around it. Super Mario Odyssey, they take Cappy, such a simple idea, build a whole game about around it. So like I'm no game designer or anything. I'm just some guy sitting in his room talking about video games, but I feel like there's something to be said here. There's these game design aspects where you start with a concept and then you really push that concept to its limits. And I think that a lot of the best platformers really are just a masterclass of that sort of idea.
I'm just for me it's like I'm just amazed to how much like you can just like a regular platforming games, but you can put like a mini aspect to it. It's like almost like you can like reinvent or create a new like platforming racing game, a platforming collecting with stuff, platforming with killing monsters and get some like almost like an RPG. So it's always hard to what is like define what is a platforming because like some people could say like, hey, like let's take example of Zelda. A lot of for me like a lot of the Zelda into the NES or even like I would almost say like not Zelda the Link to the Past. I don't would not say it's a platforming, but it's like some Zelda they have like some platforming. Like I'm thinking maybe like of Twilight Princess. They have like some moving around the world, exploring stuff, but it's not technically like a platforming. But you know the idea is like you have like some obstacle to do, like almost like ice climbers. I think ice climbers on the NES. You have like you just need to like jump back and forth and trying to finish the level the highest possible. But you have like a lot of it's kind of weird to define this mechanic because like platforming is such a blast to play it, and the difference into like a 3ds and 2ds are quite weird. And I would say like for me like I think any platforming which is on 3D is almost like a platforming. It's kind of weird, my feeling to be honest. Like you have like so many like hack Mario as well, like so many hack Mario games, like Super Mario 60, for example. You have like so many like platform when Benny mentioned it, like Star Road or other like type of stuff like that. You need to collect stuff, but you need to explore the map. But is it really like a platforming? Or it's just really like you explore something to it. It's like what is like the real definition as a platforming per se?
When you mentioned ice climbers, Draco, it got me thinking. I feel like controls can really make or break a platformer. If a platformer has good controls, okay, it might be a good game. It depends on the level design, it depends on the mechanics, it depends on everything else. But if a platformer has bad controls, there is no coming back from that. And I'm sorry to say it. I hope there's no ice climber super fans listening to this podcast. But I don't know if you guys have played it recently, but Ice Climbers has rough controls. That game is so awkward to control. And I guess the reason I bring this up is I want to hear from you guys. Do you guys have any platformers that come to mind where you think to yourself, man, this could be a good game, but I cannot get past these controls. These controls are just, they're so bad. They hold back the game so much. For me, Ice Climber is one of those games. I cannot wrap my head around the controls of that game. They're just incomprehensible to me.
Yeah, I think for me, being that I do play, a lot of Game Boy games where, me and Bendy, we joke about it sometimes, but that Game Boy slide or that Game Boy style, there's a lot of platformers that I played on Game Boy where not only are the controls not great, but like for whatever reason, a lot of the, a lot of the Game Boy games that I played, the character has a very slidey, almost like, when you're playing a game and there's like an ice mechanic on the floor, and like for whatever reason a bunch of Game Boy games seem to have like that really weird slide mechanic. The character's like really slidey and slippery, or so that's something that's always been really hard for me to get over, but I've done it time and time again just because I do really really like Game Boy games and want to play as many as possible. And the other thing that's always really weird, that's kind of hard to get around, I guess, with controls is like, what is the character's jump like? Is it like a floaty jump? Is it like a sharp jump? Is it like, I won't even, I mean, we could have an entire conversation about games with double jump. That's something that came, kind of later on down the road for a lot of different games. But how the character interacts, like the physics of the game, always seem to make a really big difference for me. And if the physics are bad or just really annoying, like there's kind of again that happy medium between the characters jump being too floaty and the characters jump um being like too sharp, like too I don't know a good way to put it, just like too sharp. Like when they jump, it's a very specific amount that's just like not doesn't feel good or like rewarding. I mean, maybe a good example I could give is like for Game Boy, if you look at Mario Land 1 versus Super Mario Land 2, like the difference in the jumping is, I mean, those games are graphically obviously quite different as well. 2 has a lot of improvements, but the jumping in 1 is a lot sharper, and it's like the jumping in 2 is a little bit softer and more floaty. I guess obviously in that one you have different power ups as well, like the bunny ears and things like that. But that's kind of an example I can think of that comes to mind.
That's a very like good question here, Bendy and Shoot, about the control, because to be honest, like when you play like a games, you always look for good controls, or you try to. It's like I'm pretty sure like most of the player will see like, okay, if the control are not too bad to controls, I'm gonna have a better experience to play the games. And some players like me, like the what Benny asked, um, I think one of the game I ate the most today playing is SMB1. Don't hate me on that, but SMB1, I don't like the controls. It's just so hard to play those type of games, even if like so many people are able to control it. But for some feeling, I just cannot see myself to. It's like it's like I just move a little bit, and then you see a character moving like 3 foot after you just moved. So like so many platforming of those type, I'm not very good myself because I cannot be able to control those games. So when you see like somebody, like I would say like example like Shoot, when he play like Banishing Rays, like for me when I see him play the game, I feel like, oh, maybe the control is not that bad. But when I play this platforming, I see myself into another aspect. I mean, it's like it's way more harder than it looked like. So it's quite very interesting to see the difference. And like even like the Super MB2, the golden coins, that game when I play it, I was feeling that was so smooth. Everything run good. I didn't have anything to like doing the speed run achievement because I was feeling so confident into the mobility of me being able to move the characters, which is Mario. So that's very interesting to see. Like for me, like this that mean like everything into a platforming game is like if the controller, if the characters I'm using, I don't see like input delays or any type of stuff will make me like play worse, I will more enjoy the games than other stuff.
I'm a pretty big fan of the first Super Mario Brothers personally, but even that said, I can totally understand where you're coming from about the controls, Draco. Personally, I really like how the game controls, but it's a bit of a learning curve to get used to it. It controls very differently than you expect, especially from modern platformers. And really, if you look at the evolution of the 2D Mario games, there is such a big difference between Super Mario Brothers and something like a new Super Mario Brothers or Mario Maker, for example. Like you could be playing the original SMB style in Mario Maker, but the physics are completely different, not even close. The newer Mario games, going back to what Shoot said, the newer Mario games have more of an emphasis on that floaty type of control. When you're in the air, it's like you're jumping on the moon. You have so much control over your movements in the air. Whereas in older games, when you're in the air, you jump and you're pretty committed. You have a little bit of air control, but in something like Super Mario Land or Super Mario Brothers, you have so much less control in the air. But then on the other hand, if we're looking at the NES, there's games with full on committed jump arcs. I think the king of that kind of game is Castlevania, right? If you guys have played Castlevania, when you jump in that game, you basically got two options. You're either jumping straight up, straight down, or you're jumping in an arc. And when you jump in an arc, you're jumping in a very specific arc and you're 100% committed to that arc. Same thing with something like Ghosts and Goblins or Super Ghouls and Ghosts. Even when you have a double jump, each of those double jumps is committed to an arc. And I feel like that isn't necessarily worse controls, it's just a different style of control. And what it comes down to is it depends on, is the game designed around these controls? Because I could play something like Castlevania and have a fun time because the entire game is designed around the limitations of your controls. So I don't think it's necessarily a good controls versus bad controls discussion. It's just some platformers have stiffer movement and that's okay. It's just different.
So I have just a question in mind for both of you guys and the audience who are watching us. I'm very curious to see. Do you prefer 2D platform or do you prefer 3D platform, and why? So put in the comment of this video like if you prefer 2D and 3D. So shoot and Bendy, I'm very curious to see what you're thinking about that question.
That's almost a toss up for me depending on the game. I would lean towards 3D, specifically 3D collectathons, because I grew up with like Banjo Kazooie, Super Mario 64, a little bit of Donkey Kong 64, things like that. But on the other hand, I do really like a lot of the 2D platformers that I have played for Game Boy and other systems, but I would probably lean towards the 3D platformer collectathon style because it's just, I find it, unless the game is like very very tuned, like very difficult, I find the 3D platformer collectathon style very relaxing, just something that's not too intense, that you can chill out and kind of just play at your own leisure and explore. And I would think I would lean towards the 3D platformer, specifically the collectathon subgenre, because that's something that I grew up with and I really enjoy.
Before I answer Draco's question, I just wanted to comment on something you said, Shoot. I think it's funny that you say you find Collectathon 3D platformers relaxing, because for me, I feel like I have sort of the opposite reaction. I feel like Collectathons stress me out because I'm a completionist, right? I always want to get everything. And there's always that point in a 3D collectathon platformer where I'm missing just one thing or just a few things in the level, and I'm looking all over and I can't find it. And a lot of the times for me, that's just so stressful and frustrating, and that's the opposite of relaxing for me. But anyway, to answer the original question, what do you prefer, 2D or 3D platformers? It's honestly a really hard question for me. Platformers in general are one of my favorite genres. I've been playing platformers my entire life. When I think about my all time favorite platformers, I do think that most of my all time favorites are 3D platformers. But that said, I think I might prefer 2D platformers in general. And the reason I say that is because I think that there's only a handful of 3D platformers that really rise to the top that are really, really good games. And I think there are a lot of 3D platformers that are pretty mediocre and forgettable. Whereas with 2D platformers, I think it's easier for me if I just pick up a random 2D platformer, even if it's not great, odds are I'm probably going to have a fun time with it. 2D platformers are more of a safe bet where I know I'm going to enjoy it, even if the game's not great. Whereas 3D platformers, I only really have fun with if it's one of the greats, if it's one of the best of the best.
I don't want you to be sad, Bindi, but I will agree with you on that one. I will go for definitely 3D platforming and Connectathon as well. Just because of the reason of I have spent so much time, even if you don't consider that much of platforming, Spyros on PS1. I have spent so much time into those like Mario 64, Spyro the games. I spent Mario Sunshine. I really enjoy all the Mario Odyssey as well. So I have been into like so many 3D games actually, and for me it's not even a question between like both of the two. I mean, I cannot say much than that. I just love like the fact like you have like a full control of the character. It's not too hard to control it. Even it's you have no lag input into it. You can do your precise move. I like collecting a lot of stuff, but as well. So for me, it's not even a question. And before, I just want to bring another question to both of you as well. So what is your favorite 2D games and your favorite 3D game as well into platforming?
I would say for me, for 3D, I would probably go with like Banjo Kazooie is probably my favorite 3D platformer. I mean, I've played it, I don't know, maybe half a dozen times over the years, and it's just really good memories. And also, the set on RA for it is really, really good. So I would highly recommend Banjo Kazooie. Um to anyone that's looking for a pretty, it's got some decent challenges set up for it, but it's tough but fair is the way that I would put it. um for 2D, to answer your question, um I would say probably Super Mario Land 2 Six Golden Coins. We've talked about that quite a bit, but that's one of my favorite ones. Super Mario Land 3 as well for Game Boy, aka Wario Land 1, is um, probably one of my favorites. And then to kind of to go to something a little bit less mainstream, I guess I would say Batman, the video game for Game Boy, is a really fun platformer and kind of a hidden gem by Sunsoft that pretty good set on RA, pretty straightforward. I think it's like no hits in each level, and no hits on boss fights, and then just level completions. But that one's also a lot of fun as well. I would recommend to people. So that's, I guess, a couple of mine.
So again, these are such hard questions. Favorite 2D platformer, favorite 3D platformer. You're asking me to choose among the best of the best, but I think I have a couple answers. For 2D platformers, this might surprise you guys. You might be expecting me to say something Mario or something Nintendo, but my favorite 2D platformer is Rayman Legends. Guys, if you have not played Rayman Legends, you have to play this game. It is so good. So, for one, every single level is so unique, so memorable. It's one of the things this game excels at. The level design is top notch. It has collectathon aspects where you're collecting things in every level to try to get 100% or whatever. So it's not just getting to the end of the level. The controls are perfection. The music is great. Just I cannot say enough great things about. And I'm not even a Rayman guy. I wasn't a fan of the Rayman series before playing this game. Like I had very limited experience with the series, but I just got this game because people were saying it was so good, and it absolutely blew me away. Rayman Legends, one of the best. As for 3D platformers, on the other hand, it's got to be one of the Mario games, right? Like, I can't not choose a Mario game as my favorite 3D platformer. I just don't have it in me. If you asked me this question a few years ago, my favorite would probably be Galaxy 2. I feel like Galaxy 2 embodies everything I love about Mario, and I think the second one rather than the first because I really like the difficulty level in that one. It's just right. The difficulty level and the level design is really satisfying in that one for what I like in a game. But I don't know, man. Odyssey might be better. It's still so recent that I feel like I need a few years to really digest it and see how I feel about it. But I really, really, really loved Odyssey. That is just mm, such a fantastic game.
So, for answering my own question about the 2D, it was a pretty tough decision for me as well. 2D, I will say my favorite 2D game would be SMB3. I mean, How can you not love SMB3, right? It's Mario. He's super cute. You have some stuff to do. I think for me it would be the classic platforming games. That I would go for that at 100%. And for the 3D games, I have it's a tough one. I mean, I have like Sparrow in my head, and I think I would still go with Sparrow in my head. I mean, how can I not love my beautiful purple dragon, right? I mean, you have some cute gems to collect. Even yeah, I'm going go for my beautiful 3D. It was tough because I really enjoy speedrun and play Mario Odyssey. It was one of my go to go. But man, when I think just about the Spyro, obviously I need to go for my Spyro.
Yeah, and one thing I completely forgot about because we've been talking about all the different aspects of platformers and what makes them and mechanics is we didn't even talk about bosses actually, and that's a pretty big aspect of a lot of platformers. Some platformers don't have them, uh, but a lot of them do, and I think that there's a lot of heavy debate on what constitutes a good boss and what makes a boss annoying. What makes a boss not enjoyable to go against. Um, one example that comes to mind is a boss with multiple phases where it takes a significant amount of time to, let's say, get through phase one and two, only to wipe on phase three and be reset back to phase one. But they don't want to make it too fair and or too easy rather, not too fair, but too easy, and have it so that every phase of the boss is checkpointed. That's a little bit, depends on the game, but that's a little bit too easy. But you don't want to have it where it takes 15-20 minutes to get to phase 3, and then you die and then you're reset. So I think there's some interesting aspects of what makes a boss good and what makes a boss bad, and then how also you're attacking the boss. Are you chasing the boss and getting to the end of a level and then it like does damage to the boss, or are you fighting the boss one on one directly in combat and having to dodge and so on and so forth? So those are just a couple of things that I thought about that we hadn't even talked about.
That's a really good topic that you bring up about bosses. I feel like for me personally, I think this might be a bit of a controversial opinion, but I feel like I tend to prefer platformers that don't have bosses because when I think about bosses and platformers, a lot of the times it's just sort of like, all right, here we go. We're going through the motions. Here we go again. It's difficult for me to think of specific bosses and platformers that really stand out in my head as that was a great boss. That was a real highlight of the experience. One thing I really dislike that a lot of bosses do is they do this thing where they're invulnerable for a really long time. So all you could really do is focus on dodging their attacks, and then they have a brief window where they're vulnerable, where you could hit them, and then you just kind of rinse and repeat until you hit them enough times that they're dead. That just it's so old. I'm sick of that formula. I prefer something where you're kind of in the action the entire time. Like you look at a Mega Man boss. Mega Man bosses are awesome because you're in the action, trying to dodge and trying to shoot them the entire time. There's not a dull moment. Uh, but I can't believe we haven't brought up Mega Man until just now, talking about platformers. But anyway, yeah, another thing about bosses is I feel like so many platformers try to copy the Mario games, but I feel like the Mario games don't really have the best bosses, especially the older Mario games. They've gotten a little better in recent years and in the 3D games, but the older 2D Mario games, like you had what? Okay, in the original game, you had Bowser. You just kind of jump over him or damage boost through him. You had Boom Boom. You had the Koopalings. And a lot of these bosses follow this tradition of 3 hits and then they're dead. I hate the 3 hits and then they're dead trope because it's so predictable and it's way too easy. especially with bosses like Boom Boom or the Koopalings, where you just hit them the moment they become vulnerable again, and they don't even get a chance to attack you. Like, it's just, they aren't good bosses. I don't know, man. I don't enjoy those kinds of bosses.
I'm just amazed, to be honest, with the bosses actually, and I'm surprised we didn't talk in yet. The way I'm amazed about the boss is I mean, we have like a lot of platforming, and a lot of them have like some simple bosses, some other difficult bosses. Like example, like any bosses are different. So like what has amazed me the most is the type of different aspect to kill a boss is different. Like example, like the womp is super big. You need to ground pound it. Otherwise, you have Koopalings where you need to jump on them. Some of Koopaning have different type of attacks, which is different of different aspect to them. Or even like Mega Man. I'm surprised you didn't talk about a Mega Man. Even if you don't really like Mega Man, you just look those bosses and they are totally like each of them are different. Between like all the series of Mega Man, they're all different. They have some unique attacks. They have their own powers. So even on 3Ds, they bring up some mechanics are different to the way you need to kill them, and sometimes are really easy to kill them. Like Benny said, like a multiple hit. But I'm always amazed about how much hit or not hit, but how much like the boss is different. So I think we're gonna close with this topic number two. So now we're gonna introduce your about the next topic will be the free point. Just before we talk about the free points, I want to mention to all the community we are watching us, we don't want to tell you which game will be free point. It's not the reality. I know a lot of people in the community have different opinion about free point. We are here today to present you a view of why people talk about that, like why people talk about always free points, and we want to have a different opinion. No, we have a different opinion on it, and I'm very curious to see. I want to like some people maybe I want them to change their mind about it because I think like it's a pretty big subject and this subject will I know like bring a lot of stuff into the community. So we want to talk about like does free point is a myth or it's a reality? I'm very curious to see your first your opinion, guys.
Yeah, this idea of free points is kind of a big topic in the RA community. So before we dive too deep into it, we need to try to define free points. What is meant by free points? So I'm going to try my best to give a definition, and you guys can pitch in with your thoughts if you think something should be different, or if you have a different idea, or if you agree, or whatever. But I feel like with the idea of free points, it's a twofold definition. Part one is the points need to require minimal effort. The points are easy to get, right? And what's easy for one person might not necessarily be easy for another person. And we'll get more into that later. But part one is the points are easy to get. Part two is this idea of free points implies you're getting a lot of points in a short period of time. So easy to get and a lot of points in a short period of time. Do you guys think that's a fair definition? Is there anything you would add to make it a little more thorough or anything you would change? I'm just curious if we're on the same page here.
I think that's a pretty good broad general definition, but one thing you also have to think about that I think we all think about at one point or another is what is a lot of points? Because a lot of points um, can be a little bit subjective, I guess, depending on um, ranking and then also depending on what you're focusing on. I think that um, overall, just generally speaking, I couldn't put a specific number on what's a lot of points. I couldn't say 100 points an hour or 1,000 points an hour or something like that. Although 1,000 points an hour, I think universally people would agree 1,000 points in an hour would be quite a bit of points. But it's hard to put, when you boil it down to numbers, it's hard to put really a specific number on it a lot of the time, especially with how the rankings do work on retro achievements. But I think overall that's a pretty good broad definition, that they have to be pretty easy to get and they have to be quick. I think those are two things that you could that we could all generally agree upon, what for the most part.
So I think Benny, one thing you maybe forgot to mention here is some people think about fruit point is a meme. So people use that meme, and example, you have games come in and they just think about it's too much free point, so they just meme about it, but without just like feeling like other people say like, yeah, that this game is free point. So some people will just agree with them without even knowing what it is, and they just meme about it just because they think it's just normal. So like when I say like, is it a myth or it's actually a reality? For myself, I really think this whole system of free points of people have created in my mind, it's pretty much a big reality, because a lot of people will just think it's, I think it's just real. I mean, I don't really want to say it's real for myself. I don't think it's that. I mean, for me. It's a. I think it's a big problem in some ways, but it's very a hard subject, because if you go like, if you go too hard on that, some people would disagree on you. But it's like, we're gonna talk a little bit more later with the other stuff. But man, those free point is something else, man.
It's a difficult topic, right? We talk about this idea, is it a myth, is it a meme, or is it an actual real thing? And I think a lot of the times when you see people leaving those comments like, oh, this set is free, or this is free points, I think a lot of the time people are just saying, they're using free as a synonym for easy, right? People might look at a set and say, this is free because it's an easy set, it's an easy badge, but it might not necessarily be free points because the points per minute ratio is terrible. Like, I'm the type of player, I like going for badges. So I've played a lot of games where the badge doesn't necessarily take a long time to get, but you get so few points during that time period that, yeah, even though the game was easy, I wouldn't consider it free points because it's such a small number of points. Does that make sense?
So let's start with the first. So why we think this is easy? So let's talk about why it's easy, to be honest. I mean, some players, I feel like some players like me, because I think I have played a decent amount of stuff. And when we say it's pretty much easy, I think we look about like you play like anything. I think we play like anything sometimes without even having fun on anything, just for having some points. And I think some players will go and play like, what is like the fat game, well, not fat game, fattest games to play as quick as possible. And the only thing I can think about that is like, the only example I would give, like some Atari game example, some they don't have like a complex mechanic, or no, not mechanic, but they don't have a complex like, you need to play like 30 hours into some games. Those games are tend to be like maybe an hour shorter or 30 minutes shorter. They have a couple levels and they pretty much it. So some players will go ahead and play like whatever, it's like very fast, don't take any more like a lot of skills, and they going into those little games to just make, just having them, and call that some free points.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic. You have these games that are sort of arcade style games where the goal is to get the highest score possible, or the goal is to last as long as you can, or something like that. And I feel like for a lot of these games, people are quick to say, oh, that's free points, but not necessarily, right? Because a lot of these arcade style games, they're very skill dependent. And it comes down to the individual, how long it will take for that individual to master the game. Some people can pick up a game they've never played before and they just have a knack for it. They could develop those new skills really quickly and become a master at the game before long. Other players will need to practice and practice and practice before they could get a high enough score for that final achievement, whatever it may be. So I think what it ultimately comes down to, for me anyway, is like I said earlier, free points depend on the individual. Different people are going to find different games free. I know for me, I've played some high score based games where I couldn't master the set. It just felt like it was too hard for me. And I felt like the only way I would be able to do it is if I invested a ton of time. There have been other games I've played where I mastered it fairly quickly, and other players either couldn't master it or took a really long time just because I happened to have a skill set that worked well for that particular game. I think for me also, a lot of my childhood games, the points tend to be freer there because I know the game inside and out, and I could just I know exactly what to do. I can knock it out quickly. Uh, Same thing with if you have a background speedrunning a game, or if you have a background just you're really skilled in a certain genre of games. Like you might be really good at fighting games, you might be really good at racing games. If you're skilled at a genre, that skill might extend to other games in the genre, and you might consider those games free. So yeah, ultimately for me, it comes down to it depends on the individual. It really does.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good way to put it because when you're talking about free points, it's I mean, it's not black and white at all. It's very subjective, and I'm sure that there are titles that people would just universally agree are pretty easy. So one example I can think of is anything that has unlimited continues and doesn't have any stipulations of achievements regarding those continues. That's generally agreed upon that that's probably a little bit easier and might lean towards the free point side of things. You know, that's why a lot of achievement sets do have things like no continue, because otherwise, you know, there wouldn't be much difficulty in the game itself, um, because the game offers unlimited continues. So I think unlimited continues is a pretty good example. If there's no stipulations of something of the achievement set having unlimited continues, then you know that kind of probably would be something that falls into that area. Um, you know, games that are pretty short as well, like you mentioned, Bendy, kind of going back to touch on that a little bit. Games that are pretty short, a lot of times they're not even worth what would be considered, I guess, a lot of points. You know, uh, so there's also that to think about. That just because a game's short, maybe it's not worth that many points. So are the points really free when you're spending such a short amount of time, but you're only getting a small amount of points? And I think ultimately that is kind of the goal of the system, the scoring system being fair, is that it should be based on, you know, the player effort and also the amount of time that you're going to put into the game regardless of who you are. I think that's kind of something that the staff are doing a really good job of, is trying to put to score things and rescore them and put them in appropriate ranges so that the time investment is equal to the point value that you're getting out of. And it doesn't always work out like that. You know, there's so many games on RA that inevitably there's gonna be this odd kind of imbalance here and there. But I think, you know, as more things get rescored and um, as more games get added and the new system gets implemented more and more, um, I think that slowly but surely things are kind of getting towards that point, which is a good thing. It's a good thing overall because it favors, you know, people playing well over just trying to say, hey, what's the, like Draco said, what's the fattest amount of points I can get in the shortest amount of time? So,
So one thing I want to talk about here is it's another like term, or it's another like hard subject to talk because some said, I mean, I have developed maybe like four or five set at these days, and it's quite a hard to. It's like when you dev something, you can have like many ideas, and some set are tend to be like very a lot of achievement, and sometimes for some player it's quite a hard for them to. It's like example, you play a platforming games, and then suddenly after you complete the level for the first stage, you have one, two, three, maybe four achievement popping at the same time. So it's like for some players are like, oh my god, for one stage I have like four achievement at the same time. So for them, it's like, oh wow, this is way too much free. Look at that, I just did one stage and I have like a million of point already. So it's very hard to see like as like example, if you dev something like I mentioned, you have so many good ideas, and those ideas are probably good, but like some players have some skills and they're able to execute in one single like move a couple achievement at the same time. And after that, like if they have like too much achievement on a set, some players, or I mean some people will maybe like, obviously if you put like a minimum amount of point into one achievement, but you have like, let's say like 200 or 300 achievement, of course the set will be like a long point value. So people will say like, oh, this is worth a lot, this is maybe good. And then you have like, it's like almost like a circle who never end. Like some people will say like, oh, this is very easy, we need to cut it down. But some other will say like, yeah, but the challenge is very hard. I mean, the stuff is right. So it's hard to balance. So I'm very thinking of I really want to do it for you, about both of you, is like, what for you think is like, in your opinion, a free point stuff. What is free point for you?
I'm thinking about what you said, Draco, about this idea of when multiple achievements pop at the same time and it feels like, oh, that was free. I shouldn't have gotten all these achievements at the same time. And I think my stance on the matter is having multiple pops at the same time isn't inherently a bad thing as long as the achievements are justified in their existence and they're appropriately scored. So I would say an achievement isn't justified in its existence if it feels like it's just there to fill a quota, just to have another achievement, without having some meaningful reason behind it existing. I feel like I've played games like that where I beat a level and it's like, you beat the level damage list, you beat the level this, you beat the level that. Like you get all these achievements at once. But if each of those individual conditions for beating the level is actually a unique challenge, or it actually requires me to play the level in a different way than I would normally play, then that's great, right? It's just, I feel like as a developer, I'm not a developer, I've never developed a set, but I feel I put myself in the shoes of a developer, and I feel like that must be really difficult to balance your set so that you don't have free points, you don't have, it's not overscored, you don't have too many achievements popping at once, it's not too easy, it's not too hard. And I don't know, I want to get into set development one day, but these kinds of questions, it's like, I feel like there's a lot of pressure on the shoulders of developers to get everything just right. And I feel like that could be difficult to balance.
Yeah, I think you honestly you brought up a really good point that was kind of whirling through my mind as well. Is um, there's a big difference between completing a level and having like a redundancy of like two or three achievements popping that you weren't, each wasn't justified in itself, but like I know for me, as someone that tries to be as efficient as possible and tries to complete sets as quickly as possible, and often I don't live up to what I really would like to, or I end up having to redo levels over and over again. I always try and run achievements concurrently as much as I can. And that's a trap I fall sometimes into, where I say, oh, I'm going to do this damage list and I'm going to do it with the default weapon and I'm going to do it with this and with that. And I end up trying to stack too many things concurrently, and I end up not getting any achievements because I'm trying to do it with all these stipulations at once. So I think that I would have to agree with you, Bendy, that as long as each of the stipulations of the different achievements, if they can be earned concurrently, as long as they're all justified in that you had to do an extra thing to in order to get it, then I think that's a fair thing. It's more just about the redundancy, like you said, of just having multiple redundancies that don't really add anything, or you didn't have to really do anything to earn it. It just feels like achievement spam at that point. So there is a fine. I think there is kind of a fine balance to be struck there for sure. I would definitely agree with you on that.
So I got a strong opinion on this on that thing is I don't want to say I like the term of 3 points. I think I will be almost I will I am my mind is like I love a lot of retro achievement. I mean I play games for having fun, to be honest. If I got point between the lines, I'm gonna take it. But the term of 3 points, I don't really like that much because it's not most insulting. Um, just the point of view, like I have like so many skills into racing game on some racing games. I can do like those game pretty damn fast because I did some speed runs. I have knowledge. I research my stuff and other stuff like that. So it's like, yeah, I can feel like why people will say like, yeah, you earn too much point to one stuff specifically. But imagine a fact is the big factor is we're like I would say like maybe like top 50 or top 100 players or like maybe like represent like 0.1% or 1% less the RA community and a bunch of players they're casuals and I'm thinking about like all the player casual who never played this game before and for them they have a lot and a hard time, or even they spend more time than the others to just trying to get something you maybe get in 1 or 2 minutes. So for me, the term of people just like want to decrease or increase because we are a community as after all. Everyone have different opinion on everything. We cannot agree on into a single one. It's impossible. So for me, I always tend to look like how a casual players who never play a game, who want to enjoy games, will want as some challenge to him, trying to find something creative and unique for him having some fun and giving him what he deserves to get. Like something like a reward or to like, hey, you have done this and you have earned something after it. For some players who like I said mentioned like many times who have earned this maybe I've done this achievement like maybe one time they have done it like 50 times already for them just repeat that same task is meaningless but compared to someone who never actually touch it which is like I feel this is the match of the community those points should be reward than other players. So I'm just sad to see a lot of the time when I mean, like I said, I like points in some ways, but sometimes I don't. I really enjoy more playing games I never played and seeing the actual challenge of the games. But I'm just sad to see sometime where you have some games who was in my mind maybe like fine or okays, and then you have some players who maybe have played way too much of the game and they just like decrease it because they just want to meme about it or maybe they never play it sometimes they never play maybe the game and they just want to say like hey this is free we need to do something so I think like I said it's a big reality. I'm just sad to see that, honestly. But I know like the admins and stuff doing a great job to keeping everything on task, which is a ridiculous hard task to do. But for me, that's my feel. I mean, that's my opinion. Nobody can maybe change it. This is a hard subject, so yeah.
That was really well said, Draco, and honestly, I agree with you. I feel like when people say, "Oh, this is free points, this is free points," it's kind of insulting to people who might struggle with those achievements, who might not find those achievements free. And the thing is, we all love RA for the same reason, right? We're here to achieve. We love that feeling of accomplishment as we achieve. And I think that instead of putting each other down, we really need to lift each other up. We need to, instead of saying, oh, that's free points, we should be congratulating each other like, nice, you got that hard achievement. Good job. We should be focusing on the positives, you know? I mean, anything I could do to spread a little positivity, I'm all about that. And I feel like the more we focus on this free points rhetoric, we're sort of going in circles and just sort of spiraling into negativity. Like, it's hard for this topic to not get a little bit negative. And that's not what RA is about. It's not for me. RA is about achieving, it's about overcoming challenges. And yeah, some things are a little bit easier than others. But at the end of the day, we're all doing this because we love the goals of the achievements. And I think we need to really focus on lifting each other's spirits. I really do.
Yeah, no, I mean, you guys both bring up really, really good points that I would say I generally agree on, and I think for me, in my personal time playing on RA, and focusing on being competitive and ranking um, versus having fun with the site and enjoying the site. One of the biggest things is for me, I've recently tried to just more play what I find to be fun versus trying to find the lowest hanging fruit as far as points are concerned, because it's just been a lot more enjoyable for me. And we talk about that fine balance between, having fun and getting points and all that. And I think that for me, now that I've hit my goal, as far as ranking, I'm pretty happy to just play what I want to play. The points, they're great. They'll come with the set, whatever. They'll come with time, I guess, is rather what I meant to say. But I also agree that, just encourage people and lift each other up. And it is hard to talk about this subject without, not spiraling into negativity or getting negative about it, because at the end of the day, we're all here to have fun. We're all here to enjoy the website, and we talked about it before. We've talked about it and talked about it a lot. There's a lot of different ways to enjoy the website. So enjoy the website in the way that's best for you. Don't worry about, what other people are doing. Obviously encourage your friends and your rivals and things like that, and have a good banner and back and forth. But at the end of the day, just enjoy the site. Just enjoy it. It's a great site. There's a lot of people that put a lot of hard work into it, and I think all three of us will unanimously agree that we very much appreciate the work that the admins and the staff do to keep things running and to keep things smooth. So
I cannot agree more than of what Shoot and Benny just mentioned here, because the only last stuff I want to mention here is we have such a great community. I mean, this is only like a little stuff. For me, it's just a little like term where maybe we should maybe stop to think about or stop to talking about, because at some point for some players, I'm just guessing, at some point it could be like, I don't want to say like, I don't want to say anything negative about it, it could be like almost toxic in some ways, because the more we heard about it, the more of it, it could be like everybody think differently, and everybody have a good or bad opinion on anything. And it's just so sad to like just like hearing this every single day, and then at the end you can almost be like into a bad mood rather than have a positive attitude, because you just have some term where you just have some negative impact into you, rather than having some such amazing fun playing with friends, climb the ladders, don't just don't care about anything else. What you have earned it, and don't feel bad about it. So I think that's an opinion where we want to give all of you. I hope you like the subject. I mean, like I said, we don't want it to be on any case disrespectful to anybody. This is our own opinion. We wanted to discuss this because this is a, I think, I feel it's a big impact into the communities. Uh, because, like I said, we have many ways to approach it. I hope we have changed your mind in some aspect into it. I'm very curious to see the comment after this podcast. So I think it would be all the time we have for you for you guys today's. Make sure to follow us on YouTube's our podcast on YouTube's. Make sure to hit the bell notification to not miss another episode of us, and make sure to leave us a comment, maybe for a question of the week as well. So we are always excited to read that. Thank you to Shoot and Bendy for the awesome episode of today. Have a great weekend, guys.